You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello! Today I'm joined by Cheryl Janis, a contemporary textile artist working in Taos, New Mexico. Her work with felt explores the confluence of ancient civilizations and contemporary spirituality, and her cruelty-free textural tapestries are infused with high vibrational healing energies. Cheryl has 15 years experience working as a Feng Shui and wellness designer, focusing on creating nourishing and meaningful spaces at home and in the private healthcare sector. Cheryl has written 2 design books, The Waiting Room Cure and The Color Cure. Cheryl is also the host and producer of the Healthcare Interior Design 2.0 and the Lavender Room podcasts. She's going to tell us a lot about the Lavender Room podcast on the show today. Cheryl shares with me how our spaces, our homes, our offices, the places we live, work, and play can nourish our souls and enhance our well-being. We talk about colors, textures, shapes, and investing in our homes as a form of self-care. Cheryl shares what home means to her. She talks to me about her art, and she shares some of her personal experiences with nourishing spaces. I know Cheryl through my mom, Luann Nigara, as Cheryl was a guest on my mom's podcast, A Well-Designed Business. I will link my show. I won't link my show. I will link all of Cheryl's shows and my mom's show with Cheryl on it in the show notes. All right, so here's my conversation with Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Christy. I'm so happy to be here.
This is such an interesting topic. I'm so excited to dive in with you. And I think to just give myself kind of a baseline, and for anyone listening, could you start by maybe talking to me a little bit about what home means to you and how you define it?
Well, a home is a sanctuary. And what I mean by that is it's a place where we can really be let down our guard. And it's really beneficial to our mind, our body, our souls, our hearts, that it be a place of refuge and respite, and that it's extremely loving, like a loving relationship. That means that you have soothing colors on the walls and things. You can find things easily. You can lay your head on a pillow or a pillowcase and a pillow and a bed that feels like a hug. And that every room offers you nourishment, and especially during difficult times, challenging times, this is particularly important.
I mean, to hear you say that, it's certainly a description that I've never heard before, and one that I don't know that would truly describe my home in every way. I mean, to the extent, I think, to what you're talking about. So talk to me a little bit about how someone might start to feel that way about their home. Like, where do you even begin?
Well, I just want to say that there's been a greater awakening because of the pandemic. And so you know that I have a new podcast called the Lavender Room Design podcast. And on that podcast, I interview female interior designers who are exceptional at designing really soulful and nourishing spaces, homes that we're talking about right now. So all of them say across the board that their clients are asking for different things. There's more of an awakening. There's this sense of, oh, now we're living more in our homes, with our families. We need to rethink this, how we live together, our relationships. So it's deeper than just, a paint color on the wall. So I just wanted to preface what I'm going to say with that. How do you begin to design a nourishing home? That's a great question. First, you take inventory and you see how you feel in the space. So ask yourself where you live most and where you and your family, your kids, your husband or wife. And you might notice that the formal dining room never gets used. There might be an extra room in the house that is just like piled up with stuff. There may be something about the living room that just doesn't feel right, but you can't put your finger on it, and you end up being in the kitchen more. So that's the first step to kind of feeling into this idea of, how can my space support me through this time, through my emotions, through sadness, through grief, through anxiety, through depression, through everything. So that's the first step, to do that. And then after that, taking a look around and see if you have clutter. Clutter is something, if you look into the psychology of hoarders, and I just don't mean that in a judgmental way. I just mean people who collect and gather things in their space and they don't really get rid of anything for many, many years. It's really because they don't feel safe. And they want stuff around them because that makes them feel better or safer. But really it's keeping them stuck. And so, having an organizing consultant come in, and I have some friends who do that and come in and gently move through things. So you want to try to clear out clutter if that's an issue. If clutter isn't an issue and you're more of a minimalist and you're like, my space just feels cold, or this doesn't feel home to me, then just start with one room. Go simple and invest in a paint color that you love, or hire a color consultant. There's lots of people online who are totally affordable that you can pay an hour or two, or maybe you have a friend or a beloved or a family member who's really good at colors, so you don't want to paint a room red or anything that's in the red family, because that will trigger, irritability and all kinds of things. It's too fiery. So just start by painting your room. That's where I would recommend beginning. I don't want to overwhelm anyone who's listening right now. I want you to actually do the things I'm saying and not feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. No, totally. And actually what I was thinking as you were talking was that my home leans on the cold side, mostly because my husband and I cannot get on the same page for the life of us when it comes to what to do with our space. I mean, he's let me do baseline paint colors and we came to some sort of compromise on it. Right. But I guess that's a whole thing in itself when the decision makers within the home can't agree. But also what I was also thinking was, I think that where potentially I also struggle, and I think those of us who grew up in the Pinterest social media age of wanting our home to look like what we see online, but that might not necessarily coincide with what feels good and is truly what we want. And I have a little bit of a hard time marrying those two.
Yeah, that's very common. So part of my history is that I was a wellness designer and a feng shui consultant for 15 years. So I'm an artist now, but the same principles apply. So it's difficult. It can be challenging when you have a partner who's not on the same page, which if you can afford to hire someone you love, someone you connect with, an interior designer, then they make it easier because they can show you visuals and then they can also be really good listeners and listen to both of you. It's kind of like going to counseling, but
Yeah.
but for your house.
Right.
And you know, that's, if you're really stuck, that might be something to think about and invest in, just as you would invest in a good psychologist or counselor, right?
Yes.
Because our home beauty raises the immune system. Beauty lifts our hearts. And so there's also this idea, though, Christy, that, in the space, you have community spaces and you have private spaces. So you could just start in a private room that you have. Maybe if you have a private area, it could be outside or inside. That's just for you. Then you can think about buying local art that you love or from an artisan or on Etsy and decorating that space. Maybe you could paint it. So again, this is if you have your own personal space, and maybe you can talk to your husband about that and say, okay, we're going to have community spaces and we're going to have private spaces, and we each get to decide, like home offices, right? Maybe a lot of people maybe listening have a home office. Well, try making that home office beautiful and uplifting and totally you without compromising. That's your room. So,
Yeah.
so you may, well, I think those are some good, because the coldness when I say coldness, I mean, it just doesn't feel cozy. It feels kind of, white walls, maybe a lot of hard surfaces. That tends to lead to a hardness in the mind, right? And that's a feng shui concept. So softening in some way, but maybe starting with yourself or hiring someone who can guide you through that, because maybe you are a very fiery person and maybe your husband's more mental, and maybe he likes to study things that are in the mind and higher consciousness through the mind. And so that's a quality that's reflected differently in the space. So I think I think that coming together and putting it as a priority is really a good thing. And then negotiating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always fun for us.
Yeah. I know it's hard.
Yeah. Like let me give you a quick example.
Okay.
In our family room downstairs, it's where we spend most of our time, and the walls are bare. And I had suggested, a gallery wall on one wall, and because he wants family photos around, and I'm totally fine with that. But why the wall is still bare is because he wants fully color canvas photos as this gallery wall, and I wanted either color photos all in the same frame, so there was some uniform to it, or black and white canvas. And like these are just the types of things that the wall for a year now has just still been bare because we will not just come together on. It's like torture.
So sorry.
Thank you.
It's hard.
It is.
I mean, it's like limiting our creativity, right? But I mean, there's another person and children who live there. So he wants canvas.
He wants like full color canvases on the wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he won't compromise with having them mixed, or
I don't know. I mean,
you won't compromise?
I don't know. It's the type of thing where we get started in the conversation and then ultimately we've just not made it a priority.
Okay.
It's one of those things that we just sort of go, we're not agreeing again. Let's move on. And I'm not necessarily sitting here thinking that you're going to solve that for us. I'm just more.
No, it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah,
though. You never know.
It's just one of those. It's one example, and I also, I grew up with my mom, and I've now spent so much time working with her and watching all of the designers, and so I have this image in my head of what my house could look like, whereas he has a completely different view. If he could, he would have family photos on every wall of every room, and I'm just
Aww.
it's sweet, but I also wanted some decor, some actual design. It's just one of those things.
I might make this suggestion for you guys, is to create a love altar if you don't already have one. So
I don't. What is that?
You don't have one? So
No.
In your bedroom, maybe it's a dresser in front of the bed or to the side of the bed, and dedicate a tabletop area to your relationship. And so that might mean a certain plant in the middle with photographs of your wedding and vacations surrounding it, times when you've really gotten along, times have been really joyful, loving. And don't put family photos there, because you want to keep the family photos out of the bedroom, right?
Right, yeah. We do have above our bed a gallery wall of just photos of us.
Okay, well, that's good. That could be your love wall. So just, think of it like that. So you want to move into your body, move into your heart. And, I understand, you see, there's a lot of designers, amazing interior designers that your mom has interviewed on her podcast. So, and yet there's the invitation to get quiet and really think about what you love. Like, you may love, stuffed animal panda bears, or,
Yes,
and it doesn't go with Pinterest or whatever.
Right.
You may love, little things that you just don't know why, but you just love them, right? Eagles, statues of eagles, or who knows? There's, and so it's really thinking about that. And then it's thinking about softening, what nourishes me, right? Asking that question, like, if it's cold and there's a lot of hard spaces, like, can I buy a beautiful new comforter and some rugs to soften it up? And gosh, I have all of these amazing resources through my mom. I could get great pricing at some amazing, rug outlets or rug stores or rug. And it's softening and it's bringing in curves. So we all live in these square boxes, rectilinear spaces with square rectangular windows, and then square rectangular doors, and then door frames, and on and on and on. And then we put square tables in there, and it's like really square.
Yeah.
And it makes people feel really uncomfortable. They've done studies where when a room has more curves in it, people feel better. Their mood is better. They feel more uplifted. There's more flow. So there's studies out there. So I would think about that, and I would start with one room. Again, don't go big, because I think that's the block that limits everyone from doing anything that gets everyone paralyzed. Is like, okay,
I have this whole house that I have to, it's like, it's overwhelming. Yeah.
And then I look at these pictures on Pinterest, and it's like a remodeled kitchen, and I want to do this outdoor area, and then nothing ends up happening, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because that requires more money. and a lot of time. And so it's like, just take one step,
Yeah.
and take one step in that direction.
Yeah.
That's all. One step leads to the next step, leads to the next step.
Right. Totally. Prior to my little tangent about my husband and our gallery wall, you mentioned red as being a color to stay away from. Are there any other, tips like that come to mind? Other colors and what they do for you and things like that?
Yeah, so red in small doses is great. So sorry if I didn't say that. What I was thinking is like, don't paint your walls a bright red in a room because you'll hate it afterwards. So I had a client many years ago who broke up with her boyfriend, or she was dumped, and then she ended up painting her entire living room red by herself. It was a big living room, a lot of walls. And 6 months later, she was just angry, and just for 6 months. So I came 6 months later and we painted it a beautiful green. So another one to avoid is yellow. Yellows, people think, I'm going to put yellow walls and it's the sun and it's just going to make me feel good and it's going to warm up a space. And it does the opposite. Yellow is quite agitating. Yellow, except with children, because it's a primary color and they sense colors differently. And so here's a rule of thumb that you can take in your heart is when you're thinking about decorating your home in a very nourishing way, think about balancing cools and warms. It's very easy. So if you want to go yellow and you love yellow, do an earth yellow. Do like, some kind of a creamy yellow or something that's not so bright. I mean, like we can't be in the sun all day, right? I mean,
right.
So, if you do that, if you do a warm color on the wall, buy maybe a blue sofa, with some warm colored pillows. And then maybe a cool rug or something like that. So just think in those terms. Start thinking in that way. And then you see, it's like nature. Nature has cools and warms all over. And it's the biggest teacher. It's the best teacher, right? So the way we feel in nature, like in our most favorite place, in the mountains, underneath the clouds, in the sky, or on a beach somewhere in Hawaii, or in a garden, or somewhere else in the forest, there are, warms and cools, depending on the season too, but that's always changing. So balancing your space out that way. So when you're thinking of really soothing colors, the blues and the greens are always good, but don't get like a vomit green. What I mean by that is the yellow.
Right.
The yellow green, it'll make you nauseous. There's like studies that
oh my goodness,
have proven this to be true.
Wow.
And consult with a color consultant or a friend or someone who's good with colors.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on the paint store person to tell you what's popular or good.
Or just the little piece of paint chip, right? Like that little chip you have to imagine either on your whole room or wall. Yeah.
Paint it bigger. Buy a quart. Paint it on a big something. I mean, there are places online that sell big pieces of paper with your favorite paint colors on them. And, if you're intuitive and you have a spiritual practice and you're used to, or a meditation practice, and you're used to going in and you're used to connecting, or your practice, because everybody has this ability. If you're used to and you're practiced in connecting to the vibration of a color, or you have a friend who has a gift in this, then take them to the paint store with you and get some samples and paint them larger on some cardboard or something, and then look at it and see how it makes you feel. Stand back. Is this calming to my body? Is this too stimulating? I mean, we all have that gut feeling. We all know that, right? So my invitation to you listening, and to you, Christy, if you choose to accept this mission, is to, tune in. some paint colors and tune in.
Are there other examples of how vibrations, or I know in your notes to me wrote about spiritual interior design, like what else can we be thinking about looking for in our space aside from the colors?
Well, you really want to get in touch what's most meaningful to you. So if you have kids and you're noticing that they're having some kind of an issue, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's something you want to help them. So getting in touch with that, and getting quiet is always the best, because we pretty much are trained to not be quiet in this culture. And some of us avoid being quiet because there's pain there. So if this feels okay to you to get quiet and maybe journal or there's got to be something that you have a practice with, right? Kind of a ritual. Maybe it's you drink tea in the morning, or maybe you sit outside in the garden or under a tree. Anything in nature is always good. And then see what you've always wanted. Work, get a piece of art that you love that nobody else might understand. Spiritual interior design is just what I'm talking about. It's looking at your space as an extension of your heart, as an extension of your soul, as a reflection of you. And to support you in living your best life. And that means nourishing you through incredibly hard times.
Yeah.
And of course, it's deeper than that. It's, do I deserve this? There are other things that come up. So if you need support, get it. Get the support. Yeah. What else can I share? Yeah.
Art. What you mentioned in your notes to me as well about art being handmade. What is the significance of that?
Okay. So you know how when you go to IKEA or Walmart or Target, and they have like really cute stuff there in their home decor section, and it feels soulless oftentimes because it was made in mass production, and it was made in a factory where sometimes machines are used or molds are used. So when you choose art from a local person or an artisan to make you a table or to create a piece of art for you, then that piece has so much more resonance. It has so much more positive energy. Of course, you want to have a good feeling with the artist. You want to love their art, right? You want to love the wood that they're carving or the fibers they're using. In my case, I'm a fiber artist. You want to love that, something that touches you in a place that doesn't have words. Again, it touches you in a place that doesn't have words. It's meaningful. It's relaxing. It's kind of like that same feeling when you're looking at a beautiful cloud in the sky and you can't describe how that sky makes you feel in that moment, or that sunset makes you feel in that moment on the beach. You can't describe it to somebody. A lot of times when we take photos, they don't translate. And we all have that. We all have our happy place. Right? Yeah. So having someone actually make the art is incredibly uplifting and incredibly soulful. You know who the person is. It has a story. You can share that with others. You can support the artist. And it's oftentimes more beautiful because things that are handcrafted are more beautiful. And I'm so happy to know that this is all making a comeback. I mean, you know, buying local, Etsy wasn't around forever, you know, and buying something that's handmade and there's love that was put into that, and that goes into your space. That's pretty special, and it's pretty affordable these days. Yeah, to do that.
I think that's another positive. Well, I don't know, another is the right word, but I think it's definitely a positive outcome of the pandemic just in every way. I notice even, with anything I'm going to buy, I think, is there a small business I can support before going to a mainstream or a huge department store? Just seeing how many, unfortunately, over the past year, businesses have gone under, or just knowing how important it is now that we're sort of coming back, that the businesses need to be rejuvenated. I mean, you've mentioned Etsy. Are there other places that we could be looking for local artists?
Yes, it depends where you live. Like I live in New Mexico, and it's known for its art.
Yeah.
There are artists everywhere. It's really easy to find artists. What you can do is you can look if you live in the middle of a city and you're like art local artist. What?
Yeah.
Every city have local artists and artisans. So artisans who make wood, artisans who make furniture, artisans who make metal things, artisans who make lights, artisans who make art. Fiber art, felt art, wall art, those kinds of things.
What is fiber art?
So I am a contemporary felt artist. So fiber is just using wool.
Okay.
You've seen people weave. Those are weavers, and those are really popular, like macrame, and that's considered a fiber art, and weaves, and they're just gorgeous. And if you just look on Instagram, you can find them. So I do felt art.
Okay.
Felt tapestries. So I take, I work with, I resource the fleece or the sheep, how they have these really beautiful curls. And then once a year they're sheared. So I resource that from small farms who love their animals, adore their animals, take care of their animals. So I know it's coming from a good place.
Right.
And then I use that, and I use wool in different colors, and I make these beautiful, like high textural, almost feather-like wall hangings. And I channel all of the beautiful energy from here, from Taos, New Mexico. So the sky and the mountains and the energy of the trees and the land and the sagebrush. And I channel that all into the piece.
Oh.
And so it has a lot of soul. And so that's what fiber art is, it's working with fibers. So I work with plant fibers, linen, raw flax, which is what it is before it's linen. I work with alpaca hair, and mohair from goats that are loved on. And mohair is like soft. It's like a luxurious clothing piece. And it's just like, it just brings a lot of organic softness to your space, almost like having beautiful draperies does that.
Yeah.
So
those I have.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that would
All
be
right, high five.
Well,
Gotta have drapery.
Yeah, it's like I know a guy and a lady. They helped me out with those. That's a plug
really
for Window Works in Livingston, New Jersey.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Taking advantage.
Yes. It's just that there's nothing else. That's it. I've paint and draperies, but anyway, that's fascinating. So how did you even get started doing that?
When I was living in California in 2018, well, my mother's an artist. My mother was an artist.
Okay.
She's passed on. She was an artist. And so I kind of grew up in that environment, and I was an interior designer. Interior designers are artists. And then I learned weaving, and I loved weaving, and I just dove into that. And then I dove into felting, and I just found my place in the world. And it's just phenomenal because wool, when you it has scales on it, so when you kind of give it soap and water and friction, the scales connect. And it's an 8,000-year-old practice or art.
Wow.
And in the Mongolians, I don't know if they still use it, but they would make, these gorgeous felt pieces for their roofs because wool is fireproof, wool is mold proof. So it's taking an ancient art, which I love, and it's modernizing it and making it luxurious. So that's how I got into it. And of course, as soon as I moved to Taos, I mean, there's just artists everywhere. There's a history of art. It's just in the cells of this place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, I would never even have considered looking into that. And obviously before we jumped on, I was taking a look through your items. I mean, they're beautiful, and I think I need to have one of the blue ones.
Yeah,
because that is my color. So I'm going to be looking at that later. But that's they're really really beautiful. And even now, just talking to you, I just have an overwhelming sense of warmth, and it's making me really want that in my space, because I mean, you're right. Like this year was so challenging. This, I guess now almost 2 years, right? But just so challenging. And there's not a place that I spent more time than this house. And it really starts to feel like I went through a phase during quarantine where I wanted to gut the whole thing. And it was just like, I'm looking at the same walls. I'm looking at the same things here. I want to redo it all. And, I can only imagine potentially how different I would have felt if I had the wherewithal to make it a priority. And, I don't know, it's really, it's a lot.
Yeah, because we deserve it.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to take care of us if we don't take care of us? Like, yes, get that beautiful blanket that you love.
Yeah.
It costs a little extra. Get it. It's for you. You'll use it.
Yeah.
Get, what really feeds you, what really nourishes you, and ask yourself, what nourishes me?
Yeah.
I mean, you might have to sit with that for a while, but the answer will come.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of someone who's listening. I mean, I'm trying to also think of those listening who don't have parents who sort of have been teaching them about design and talking to them about it the way I have. So when you say how, to create a nourishing space, like what are some examples of the types of answers that you've heard from your clients, or that even for yourself you've been able to answer, just to give people a little bit maybe idea, a better idea of what you're talking about, and what get their wheels turning a little bit.
Okay, well, I used to live in Sebastopol, California, which is an hour north of San Francisco. And we lived there, my husband and I and our 2 cats, for 5 years. And at that time, which I think it was 2014, it was still, I mean, it's ridiculous now, but there's just no places to rent there. So people were setting up literally, I mean, it's gorgeous there, and it's in the hills and everything, and it's got all these trees, and it's just gorgeous, right? All these oaks. And people who owned homes were setting up like Home Depot sheds in their backyard and renting them out for $600 to $800 a month.
Wow.
Because the demand to live there is so strong. So my husband and I didn't live in a shed or anything, but we lived in a 500 square foot tiny space, but it was on a beautiful piece of land. So we had all this outdoor space, and next to the woman who owned the land, who became our friend, and so it was like good energy that way. But the space itself was small and not nice. So here what I'm saying with that is, it doesn't matter the size of your space. You might live in a tiny studio apartment, or you might live in a 4,000 square foot home. It doesn't matter. You can create nourishment in both of those situations. So, first of all, I'm going to take you on a journey right now. Imagine walking up to your front door, and your front door in the exterior has a beautiful color. It's just like this pop of, it's just like your favorite green or your favorite purple or your favorite red. You can do that on the door. And it's kind of like semi-gloss, so it reflects the light. And you walk up on that, and your front door has like 2 potted plants, on the other side, or maybe a beautiful statue of a Buddha, depending on where you're from in the United States, or your religion, or your spirituality, or any kind of a saint or anything, just how that feeds you when you come in from the outside. That's a first impression. That's constantly, your front door is, you're crossing over from the external to the internal. And you want it to be a really beautiful greeting. And then you walk in, you open the door, and the first thing you see is something uplifting and beautiful. Maybe if you have a foyer, maybe it's a beautiful painting of a place that you love. Maybe it's an abstract painting with colors that you love. And maybe it's over a console table with a lamp on it. And here's the thing about lighting. It's like you want to have layers of lighting, just like if you're outside and there's shade and there's sun, because we have a thing called circadian rhythm in our body, and that's our clock. So we're outside and it's all kind of crazy, and then we're greeted by this beautiful front door, and then we walk in and we're greeted by this beautiful piece of art. Maybe it's one of my pieces on the wall there that you love. Who knows? It doesn't matter. And so you're like, oh, I'm home. And then it's organized. So you have a welcome station. So maybe on the right or the left, if you don't have a closet, like a coat closet, maybe you have a coat rack or a coat stand. Or even if you have a tiny, tiny, tiny little space, you can have a coat, like a wall piece that has hooks, even 2 hooks. And so that's where, your dog's leash goes, and that's where your coats go, and that's where your scarf goes and your hat goes. And you're like, oh, I'm home. Okay. The next room you walk in, what's the first thing you see? Is it like, toys all over the floor? Is it like clutter? Or is it another something that's beautiful? What is that one piece in that room? So maybe you walk into the living room. Maybe you walk into, it's just one room because you live in a studio, but, follow your footsteps. So, this process has been done by a lot of dentists, because going to the dentist is really stressful, right? We all have, scariness in our body when we think about going to the dentist. So a lot of dentists who are tuned into this will have their staff, walk into, come up to the exterior door, walk in. What do they see? What are they seeing after they go back there? And making sure that visit in all points has hit some kind of a dopamine hit or something uplifting, So maybe you look into your living room and there's a fireplace there. What's over the fireplace? I mean, is it a television? Or, like a lot of people have these huge flat screen TVs, and that has its place. And some people have them in every room, and that's not relaxing. So if you can't get rid of that, run some beautiful aerial photos there, or some kind of drone photos of like New Zealand, the South Island or something. It's just, they have those for free on YouTube. These are the kinds of things they use in hospitals and healthcare spaces to help people heal. And so it could be even a beautiful pillow you see. Chairs are really wonderful. They invite us to sit down, take off our shoes. So a chair in the entryway is really nice. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it being this upholstered, $1,500 chair.
Right.
Just go get something at your local furniture store or at Goodwill.
Yeah.
And paint it yourself or something. And then, and so you want to encourage yourself to relax when you're home. You have your office at home, because a lot of us have now home offices, and that should really feel uplifting and productive. And so those are a few examples, right?
Yeah.
Those are a few examples.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, what do you think? What do you think people tend to underestimate about design and creating a nourishing space?
They underestimate the power of color, the power of a new paint color. Mm-hmm. They underestimate bringing. They have no clue. I think most people don't have any clue about how curves can change your life, change your space, and change your life. I mean, your logo has a square and then a circle around it, and that feels really good. And that's just like that's primal. Those things are primal. We're like wired that way. So I think, if you don't love yourself, then you're not going to be into this idea of nourishing yourself. But if you're listening right now and you're going through a hard time, think about creating a space for yourself that you can go through this time, whether it's a transformational time, whether you're grieving over someone's. We all need our homes to support us. So I think you just have to make that decision.
With the curves, I'm curious about this. How?
Okay.
What are the ways that we do that?
Okay, we're going to do a little thing here. So I want you to just look around in your room, and I want you to tell me what are the shapes you see, and what are they?
Almost all rectangles.
Okay. So what's the room? Living room, office?
I am in it's mainly my closet with it's a walk-in room closet with built-in shelves. I've got a built-in desk with more built-in rectangular shelves. Almost everything on the walls is in rectangular frames. Right. I have one circle clock, but even I'm looking at my lamp, it's a rectangle.
Yeah, that's okay. So you're in a closet? You're in like an oversized closet?
It's like, it basically was the sitting room to our master. That was, it wasn't large enough for a sofa or anything like that, but yes, it's basically like the sitting room to the master that I've made my closet / office. Okay.
Do you have room for a chair in there? Or do you have like a nice comfy chair that's maybe curved?
Potentially. Potentially.
Okay. Can you, well, you have a lot of books and stuff in there on your desk and things like that. So any kind of vase you can sit in there with some flowers in it that have curves?
That I could do.
Any wall space?
A bit behind me.
So something behind you that supports you. So something, a beautiful piece of art that has, it might be rectangular shape, but what's inside of it is all curvy. Okay. A piece of fiber art you love, a weaving, piece of macrame, something that has lots of curves. If there's room for a rug underneath your feet, then it's probably, is it carpeted in there or?
Yeah.
So you may not need that, but you could do like a round rug in there.
Right.
Bring a curve in there. So once you start, here's the thing, once you start understanding this, you'll just see things that are curved. So a curved side table, a curved lamp instead of a square lamp, replace that out. A curved or circular lampshade instead of, right? Or has a design on it that's curved. Coffee tables curved instead of oval, or circular instead of square. A dining room table, circular or oval instead of square. Your kitchen breakfast table instead of square. Round. How about that? Yeah. Next time you buy a sofa, don't think of a rounded back with rounded arms. They're very comfortable. Next time you buy a pillow, look at the designs. Don't get a solid color. Don't just go to World Market and get something that's a solid color. Get like a pattern on that's curved. This is feminine. This is the feminine. So all the square stuff is masculine.
How do you talk to someone who is hearing all this and thinks it couldn't possibly make that much of a difference? What do you say to them?
Well, if they're open enough, if they're just like, no, and they just, that's the way they think. I mean, that's the way they think, right? Your job is not to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. Now, if they're a little bit intrigued and they're open, you can propose it as, let's do an experiment. Would you mind if I did an experiment? And the deal is, if you don't really like it, we can return everything.
Okay.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's called negotiating.
Yeah.
So you just think of it as an experiment. Like, I think people who don't like change have a really hard time with this idea. They don't like change. They don't want to move anything because it's too scary. And then you have people who are just like change agents like me.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly, I have to create a space where there's beauty and harmony. And, I don't keep sofas for 10 years. I change them out and we move, so, so you kind of have to tread lightly. I mean, I've asked this question a lot to my guests on the Lavender Room Design podcast. And this is a standard question I ask them, which is, how do you work with your clients? Like, is this a process of education, or are they open to these things? And one of my guests, Lisa Samuel Design Group in Santa Fe, New Mexico, she coined the phrase feel-osophy. Feel-osophy. She trademarked it and she owns it. And she said that she will ask questions, be a really good listener, and go through that process. And then she will see where their edge is. And so she will gently nudge them to their edge, but won't push them too far.
Interesting.
Because otherwise, they won't like it. And she had this saying that she said right after that. She said, and I always told my kids this, there is no comfort in the growth zone, and there is no growth in the comfort zone. And I had to have her say that again. There is no growth in the comfort zone, and there is no comfort in the growth zone.
Yeah.
So it's a growing process. I have a friend who's going through the same thing with her husband. They're redesigning and choosing colors, and it's this like new paint color on the wall, and oh my God, no, it's too much. It's going to look terrible, but everything else is covered up and you can't see the whole room, but it's triggering something deeper. And so you kind of have to go gentle and slower.
Interesting.
And if that's the case, some of us are just like, woohoo, we're all in. Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
We subscribe to this practice of loving ourselves and having a really nourishing space. Doesn't cost $1 million.
Right.
You could have a tiny little apartment in, New York City or Los Angeles or wherever, Chicago, and you can do this anywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes it's nice with smaller spaces because you can get what you want because it's small.
Right.
Like, it doesn't cost as much and you don't have as much to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said about change, and where it hit me was, at any time we're doing something for the house, I've gotten better about it. But there's like this paralyzing effect, because I feel like whatever decision we make, it's final. Like, it's going to look like that forever, and it's like, okay, yes, we're going to invest the time, invest the money. So, because even now, just thinking about my first example of the silly gallery wall, like, okay, why don't we do canvas? And then, you know what? Guess what? Next year, I'm going to change it. Like, it just, everything to me with the house feels so permanent that I end up resisting making any decision at all, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to love this forever. And I don't know, it's, and just to hear you say, you can change it. It's like, oh yeah, I can change it.
Yeah, you have to give
brand
yourself
new
permission.
information.
Like in the United States, we get to return things. In
Right.
Italy, you can't return things.
Yeah.
In France, you can't return things. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a luxury of being able to return things. So it gets to be our palette.
Yeah.
You know?
So I want to ask you for a minute here, because I think it is very relevant. Anything with the home office that is like a go-to piece for you or concept for you that someone could be thinking about, as far as we've talked a lot about nourishing and comfort, and then the home office, we wanted to be a little bit more productive, right? So anything for you that really sticks out as something that you want people to think about or know about creating that space?
Yeah, I was just interviewing Bridget Romanek yesterday, who's she's this incredibly soulful interior designer in Los Angeles, and she's one of the designers for lots of really famous people. And she used to have a singing career, and so she's just like deeply, I don't know if that's why, but she has this really soulful approach. Anyway, I interviewed her yesterday, and she was talking about her office at her, I don't know if it's at her home, I think it might be at her work, but the concept is the same. She has lots of plants. She has color on the wall that when she comes in, it's like cleaning her palette. It's like when you have sushi and you have the ginger before different pieces or in between certain pieces, and it cleanses your palette. And so you want that. You want it to have all the things that I just talked about. A balance of rectilinear shapes with circular curved shapes. That goes for your office. That goes for every space. You want to have a really inspiring color on the wall. So a green or a blue, not a red or yellow. And this is not, you could do like a lighter color, like a lighter blue, so it's a little bit more invigorating. And if you're a woman, it's going to be different than if you're a man. I mean, women like curves. We respond well to curves. And having things in here that you love in that space. So a lamp on your desk that you love.
Yeah.
One lamp, keep it on, and a light from the ceiling that comes down that is just beautiful, like round and, oh my goodness. An example is like the Nelson bubble light from Design Within Reach. Circular, just beautiful light. And a round rug under your rectilinear desk. So if you want to be in the power position, so if you're like in marketing or you're in the world somehow, then you want to have a view of the door, but not be directly across from the door. Right. You want to have like a catty corner view of the door. You want a wall behind you for support. It's like the mountain. What you put behind you on the wall behind you is like what supports me. Maybe it's my totem of a tiger, and I want that on the wall behind me. Maybe it's an actual picture of a mountain. And what do you see in front of you? What's the wall in front of you? Maybe it's a window out to a beautiful view. Maybe there are, you want draperies there. So everything comes down to how you experience the space, right? And you don't have to punish yourself by having a space that you don't love.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why is your podcast called the Lavender Room Design Podcast? What's the significance?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I have another podcast called the Healthcare Interior Design 2.0 podcast, which I've been doing for about 3 years. And it's sponsored by Porcelanosa, who is a Spanish tile company. And I interview like the largest architecture firms in the world about their projects. Wow. And all these people are incredibly heart-centered. They're thinking about patient-centered design. How can we reduce staff burnout? I mean, like some heavy-duty stuff, right?
That's amazing.
These are like huge hospitals. So I was interviewing this woman, Gina Chang, with co-architects in Los Angeles, like I don't remember, some time ago. It was this year. And she told me about the Lavender Room in the hospital, and she told me about Code Lavender. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Well, the Lavender Room in the hospital is the room for staff, nurses and staff that are freaking traumatized by something. And it's a space where the chairs recline, there's music, there's aromatherapy, there are beautiful views. And Code Lavender, we all know what Code Blue is.
Right.
Code Lavender is for staff at the hospital. Like, someone's losing it, and, we need a Code Lavender here. So when I was thinking about my podcast, I wanted to interview female interior designers who their focus is creating and designing nourishing spaces for their clients. Lavender is a type of a plant, flower, that when you use the essential oil, it has calming properties. It's relaxing. There's lavender teas. There's lavender essential oils, lavender flower essences. And so I wanted there to be some kind of a container that held this idea. And so my guests are sharing personal stories about how a space held them through a dark time. What was it about that space that held them? Was it an indoor? Was it an outdoor space? I mean, I have one guest who said, oh, my husband just had a heart attack and died, I don't know, 30 years ago or whatever. And I had put this day bed. They were living in Brooklyn, and they had like a patio or something. And there was this beautiful, hanging tree, the leaves were like hanging down. And she had a day bed under there, and that's where she grieved. And, that tree was so nourishing to her, and it was like it was like dropping seeds, and those were her tears. And it sounds a little melodramatic, but she moved to California, and now she does now she's into biophilia, which is using plants and the natural environment. And so the Lavender Room Design Podcast is a container for these really meaningful, deep conversations. And I'm just so thrilled because most interior designers don't really talk about this stuff.
Right.
And they're all seeing a need. They're all feeling more like shamans. But it's something that they had within them the whole time, but they kept it kind of a secret. And they kind of would design those spaces anyway, and then they would sort of tell their clients about it, but they would use different language but their clients were always like, oh, this feels so amazing. I love this space. My life has changed. And so it's hearing that conversation. And I think that that's really important right now in this country. And they all across the board again say that there's this greater awakening among their clients and what they're seeing, that there's a need. And all of a sudden in 2020, their clients were like, nope, we don't want that anymore. Nope. We don't want that open floor plan. We want smaller, cozier spaces.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or we want to redesign our kitchen now because we're going to be spending a lot of time in there, and we want to bake, and we're with our kids, and that's most meaningful to us. So I really feel like there's a lot of healing happening, and the Lavender Room Design Podcast is that container. So thanks for asking, and sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, I mean, it's so fascinating. I didn't even know, anything about Code Lavender and that existing. And
Me neither.
I'm so happy that it does. I mean, I don't know.
It's so important, right?
Yes,
Those people are freaking on the front lines.
Yes. Yeah. In hearing the stories from the designers, are you reminded of any of your own stories, or do you know off the bat that you have one? I mean, what happened there? Yeah.
So I had a dark night of the soul time in 2018 to 2020. Was like a year and a half. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a term that was coined in like the 17th century or 18th century by St. John of the Cross or something when he went through that time. And so we were living in Sebastopol, this same place I was telling you, this really small 500 square foot little cottage, because we couldn't find anything else. And a dark night of the soul time is when you go through an extended period of time. I'm talking every day, every night, all the time. It seems like it's never going to stop. For me and for a lot of people, it is your soul kind of calling you to change something, to grieve something. Sometimes it can be brought on by a loss of someone, a loved one. For me, it just sort of came on, and I had severe anxiety and depression. I would wake up with, heart palpitations, and I thought that I needed to be in a mental, it's like you think you need to be there, and nothing works. Okay. None of your old tools, no SSRI, no medicine, nothing. It's like, it's just a dark time. And I really enlisted my space. I mean, when we go through this, we pretty much isolate, and we have like one other person who's like kind of caring for us. And we're totally freaked out because we're like, oh my God, like if I told any other person, they would think I'm crazy and I need to go to like a psychiatric hospital and I'm losing it. And it's just like a complete breakdown, like anything I've ever experienced in my life. So I stopped my business. I had an interior design business. I completely closed it because I knew that was the right thing. My husband just took care of me. I devoted all my time to self, and I couldn't watch TV anymore. I was in bed a lot. I made sure my sheets were amazing. I made sure that I had the best food. I made sure that I sat on the ground and earthed every day. I made sure that my husband was like my coach. He was just like, you're going to get through this. Don't worry. We're going to get through this every day, every hour, And then sometimes I would come out of it and I'd be like, okay, this means it's going to be over. And the next day is like back. And it's just like, who am I? Like, what is this? And it's so scary. It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
And then I knew intuitively that we needed to leave there. First of all, because the fires were going on there. And a dear friend of ours, they lost their like 4,000 remodeled square foot home that they just moved into. We had visited them that evening at like 5 p.m. and at like midnight, their house was gone.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was just like, and then there was a flood. And of course, there's been many fires since then.
Right.
But I knew intuitively, and I have a strong spiritual practice, that we needed to leave and go to the mountains. I don't know why. There was just a voice that said, go to the mountains, go to the mountains. You need to go to the mountains now. And my husband is such a dear. He's like, why don't we? He's like, he's fine with change too, because we both work from home and stuff like that. So he's like, why don't we just go rent a house for a month in Colorado and see what that's like? So we did that. We got in the car with our cats, and I'm having, panic attacks and taking Ativan and, the whole thing. But I'm just looking it up and every moment, staying in the moment. And then we didn't like Colorado Colorado Springs because it was too crowded. And again, someone stepped in and said, it's just really serendipitous. Someone said, Taos is beautiful. And we came here and lived here for a month. And we're like, yeah, we're home.
Wow.
And then, it was interesting because for the first 6 months, we lived in a condo in downtown Taos that was like really expensive and really beautiful. And a lot of people like to live there, but it was on a busy street. And so literally, motorcycles and just like all the time. And I could not heal there. And then as soon as it was like it was December of 2019, we moved to the house we're currently living in now, which is like a little bit out of town. It's like right at the foothills of the mountain. It's so gorgeous. Birds everywhere, trees, the sky is amazing. I mean, it's just a magical place. I immediately started to heal.
Wow.
That was it. That was the end of my dark night.
Wow. The
space, anyway, I was just going to say the space really made a difference to me.
No, I can imagine. Yeah. Was that the first time you had experienced something like that?
I experienced like an appetizer to that a couple years earlier, but it only lasted like a couple months.
An appetizer.
And an appetizer to that, I would call it the appetizer to the D-knots. People call those things D-knots, which means dark night. It's just an acronym for dark night of the soul time.
Wow.
And when I was in it, I'm like, I am looking, I am researching, I am interviewing like every psychologist and alternative medicine practitioner. And I'm like, no. And then I finally found someone. So I have to say that you have to have someone.
Right.
It's so important to have support, like some kind of a professional. So yeah, I did. I found somebody who was really great. But it was hell. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
it's like, when people talk about being in the dark time, like, or, your shadow work and all this stuff, like, and when you look back on it, you go, yeah, like I needed that time. Like that was like this total purification. And I'm not the same person. And now I'm doing art and all these things that are great. But it's interesting because if you look at tribal cultures, this is well documented. When people go through this, they know it. They go through a time and the village just supports that person.
Wow.
And the shaman helps them go through it, And it's like a spiritual practice. It's not looked at as like you are mentally ill and you need to go to the hospital.
Right. I know. Yeah. That's a whole other hour, but that's,
right.
I mean, that whole concept, there's two there that you touched on, but, just how mental illness is handled today, but also, I've had this conversation a few times with particularly different women who have created, like online communities for moms. And, a lot of it has stemmed from the fact that we've just really, as a society, moved away from that village mentality of taking care of each other and helping each other out. And, there's definitely, I think, pros and cons to the direction we've moved. But yeah, I mean, like I said, that's a whole other podcast. But yeah.
I mean, it was, you just need one person, but nobody got it. Nobody understood and things like that. So you just really need one person. You need a space and you need some money. Make sure you have a savings account always.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's so important to share our stories, because I think that I can imagine how terrifying it was, and to know that someone else has gone through it and come out the other side could be really comforting for someone listening now or in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're going through a dark night of the soul time, you will get better. You need help, but don't underestimate your strength to get through it. I never thought that was going to end for me. And my husband had been through it like a couple years earlier. That his was depression for 2 years.
Wow.
So he knew.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be someone that's going to help you, even if it's one person. So.
Well, Cheryl, is there anything on that note? Is there anything that you would have wanted to make sure we talk about today that I didn't ask, or that you want to leave people with?
I don't think so, except, if you're going through a hard time, nourish yourself and create a space for yourself and take good care of yourself and be kind to yourself, right? You have those ideas in your head that you're nothing, that it's all your fault, the critic, and it's really important that you are kind to yourself. This includes like wanting to take your life or any dark thoughts. You just go, I'm going through a really hard time. Yep.
Yeah.
Just try as much as you can to be kind to yourself, because that really helps.
Yeah.
And then prayer, a lot of prayer. Pray for, someone to bring, if you can do that, or meditate and ask for someone to come in to help you. And if you're listening and you know someone who's going through this, then you might be the light in their life right now, and you can help them by, being present, helping them get nourished in their space. I don't know.
Yeah. That's going to be, that might be different for everyone, right? How they can help, but to just, like you said, make your presence known and ask what they need, you know?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Cheryl, this was wonderful. I am about to drive my husband crazy because we're going to redo some spaces. I can feel it. I'm going to be on Etsy tonight. It's going to be a whole thing.
Oh, good.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was really, really great.
Well, thank you, Christy. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this podcast. I really love this podcast, and I love your platform. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. What did you think? It's been a minute since Cheryl and I recorded that conversation, and I have to just start by saying that my husband and I have put art up on our family room wall. Yes, I know. We agreed on a piece of art, and it's hanging, and one wall down. Anyway, this topic with Cheryl is so relevant in today's world where work, play, and home are all in one place for many of us. And Cheryl's right. Once you know some of these tips that she gave us, for instance, rounded furniture pieces and patterns, you can't unsee it. I see it everywhere now. I've added a few rounded and cozy pieces to my spaces since this conversation. I also loved her advice about setting the experience of your home from the point of the door. I made a reel on my Instagram a few months back about decorating for fall, and I then decorated for winter and Christmas. And I have to say, it is nice to pull up into the driveway and see the decor, but also for me to see that I was able to do that. There was a time not too long ago where doing anything extra for my house felt like a giant hurdle that I had to get over. It was such a nice reminder all fall and through the holiday season of how far I've come in my mental health journey. I'll leave you with a question, one that Cheryl invites us all to ask ourselves. What nourishes you? And how can your space better support you? Take a look around today, tonight, tomorrow, and just notice your spaces. Notice your office. Notice your living room. Notice your bedroom. What emotions come up for you? Notice the feelings and the thoughts you have about them. What ideas do you have? Explore it a little. And check Cheryl out. Check out her art. She has new art that was launched as of January 28th. So she's got some amazing pieces in stock. Check her out. All of the places you can find Cheryl are linked in the show notes. And that's it for me today. I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Niagara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.